All right, welcome to Breathing Life into Physical Objects through AR. So good morning. I hope everybody is sufficiently caffeinated, especially after yesterday's awesome party. My name is Vinny DaSilva, and I'm the developer evangelist with Vuforia. My primary goal is to help you guys all make really amazing augmented reality experiences. Vuforia, for those of you who don't know, Vuforia is the most popular AR SDK around, and we specialize in really awesome computer vision to help you recognize objects in the real world. Stuff like images, simple objects, cylinders, all that kind of good stuff. We have 45,000 apps in the app stores, and we'll have about 450 million app installs altogether. So our clients have this, our customers, so those who use Vuforia. Now, today I'm going to be talking about some really awesome new technology called model targets. And model targets allow us to recognize real-world objects, so little things, little toys, big things like cars, equipment, all sorts of good stuff. And with this, the whole idea is that if you have like an engineering solid model or a surface model, like some kind of a mesh or something, we can import that into our system, and we can recognize it. So today we're going to be talking about the workflow of what it takes to go from a model all the way to something that you have working in Unity. So the steps are involved is like getting a model, right? So finding a model that's sufficient, that's going to work for you, prepping it, doing some kind of prep work. Then obviously we have to go through a process of converting it to something that we can recognize. And then finally, we can start working it inside of Unity and then making our games or our applications or experiences. Okay, so sourcing model. So I think this is the one that, kind of the starting point. And what you guys want to do is, if you're working with a real-world product, if you're working with a client to manufacture something, reach out to them and say, hey, we're looking for your solid model, your engineering model that you use for manufacturing, and see if you can get access to that. So if you're doing something like a toy or a car or something like that, one of those clients, that's the kind of information you want to get up front. Now, if you're doing something else, there's a bunch of third-party websites out there that have community contributions, that have all sorts of models, and those are available. Just make sure that you have the correct rights and all that good stuff as far as like legality goes to use that kind of stuff. Now, you can also try reproducing something from scratch. That's something that's certainly doable, but it's going to be pretty tricky. And then finally, I think one thing that's worthwhile exploring for game developers is this idea of taking your own IP and potentially making something that's physical and augmented. Now, the next step here is prepping the model. So you might have a source model. It might look awesome in your game, or it might be great for manufacturing, but there might be some steps that you need to go through to make sure that it's something that you can actually track inside of AR. Now, so one of the things that you might want to do is there might be some irrelevant parts that are not really important. There might be stuff that moves, right? So stuff that moves might be something that you may not want to keep inside of the model. And if it's something that has a ton of detail, like really high, lots of polys or whatever, you might want to sort of reduce the level of detail so that we can properly track it. And finally, there might be some kind of conversion that happens. So we do support a lot of different file formats, but you may have to convert it. So the next step here, so you've obtained your model, you've prepped it, and the next step here is to generate what we call a model target. And that's what ultimately we're going to be looking for inside of AR. So we're going to go ahead and go through a quick demo here. And I need to move it over to the other screen. OK. I'm going to do a new project. So this tool here is the target generator. So this comes included with the model target feature of Vuforia. So we're going to go ahead and browse out here for a location. I'm going to put it into. And then I'm going to select the model. So this is actually, I think, an OBJ model that I'll be looking at. OK, so what we have here, and I'm going to try to do this on a different screen here. What we have here is a preview of the model. So we have this KTM bike that we're sort of looking at, and you have a preview. And on the right side here, we have some information of what makes a good model. And I'll go into some of the details later, but it's here just as sort of a reference. The next thing we want to do is we want to go into this detection position, where we can position the object you're looking to manipulate, you're looking to track and to augment inside of this tool. Now, it's a little bit tricky to see, but there's an outline of a phone, of a device. And the idea here is that you use this to guide the user to the optimal position to track. So I'll go into a little bit more detail later, but the idea is that depending on what size you make your object here, it's gonna sort of push the user towards either getting closer to the object of the device or getting further away. So something to keep in mind as you're sort of building out your experience and figuring out like where's the user gonna be in relative to whatever you're trying to track. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. I think that's good. OK, so I'm going to go ahead now and do set detection position. And it's generating on the side here, you can see that black and white. So that's an outline of the object. That's mostly for usability. We're going to try to use that inside of Unity, so that way we can guide the user to the optimal detection position. So once we have that loaded, and we're going to head and do generate target. And what this is doing right now is that it's generating a Unity package. We're going to go ahead and import this into our Unity scene later. OK, cool. So that's the process that that we start going from the point where we have a model to something that we can track. And that's the process of creating the model target. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into Unity and do a quick demo here of what it takes. So I have Unity loaded. All right, I might do. Let me see if this works on the fly. Yeah. OK, cool. So I have Unity loaded here. It's an empty scene. The only thing I got here is I loaded a Vuforia SDK. I loaded in some Amplify shaders from the Amplify guys. And so I just don't want to have to make you guys sit through all that stuff. So the first thing we're going to do, for those of you guys that are familiar with Vuforia, is I'm going to go ahead and go into the prefabs, and I'm going to pull in a camera, an AR camera. And I'm going to replace the main camera. Can you guys see that OK? OK, good. All right. OK, cool. So replacing the camera. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the prefabs, and this is what's new. We have a model target. So here we have all of our targets that Vuforia supports, and now we have the model target. I'm going to pull that in as well. And I'm just going to zero its position, just so that way I know where it is. Now, so we have our AR camera, so we can see the world, and then we have our model target that we're ultimately going to be tracking. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to import that asset I made earlier. I think this is one that I did. Yeah. So here we go. So here we have our package. We're going to go ahead and import it. It takes a couple seconds. And we got it in there. Now, now that we have it imported into Unity, we need to activate it. So we got a couple steps here. So I'm going to go into the Vuforia menu, configuration. And then one of the things I need to do is I need to pull in my license key. Your license key you can get from, like when you're setting up your project, you set this up online, and you can get a license key there. And then what I should see here is here's my data set. So this is the data set that got generated from the model tool. And I'm going to go ahead and load it and activate it so that way we can start tracking it. And the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to select my Logitech camera that's right up here that I'm going to be using for testing. And I'll show that in a second. So now if I run the app, just as it is, we should see, there we go. So we're seeing the live camera feed. So this is what I'm going to use for testing. OK, so now what I'm going to do is, now that I'm going to go back to my model target prefab, and I'm going to select the KTM bike that we just imported as our target. And if I double click here, we're seeing, so there's an outline, and this is mostly to help developers out. So that way when you're building out your senior experience, you have an outline of what your model is going to look like. So that way you can sort of figure out spacing and figure out your game mechanics or app experience based around the size. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to Vuforia menu, and I'm going to create guide views. So guide views, ignore these guys here. That's a small bug we can fix. The guide view is just a way to, like I mentioned before, it's that outline that we see that we can sort of start tracking. Now I'm going to go ahead and run this guy. So you see the outline of the bike. So that's the guide view. This is to help the user find the item. Now I'm going to go ahead and go over here, and we have these bikes on stage. And assuming that the lighting is not too bad, should start tracking. It might be a little dark in here, so we're not getting it. But let me try from this side here. Well, of course, it's a live demo, so things are not going to go perfectly. But feel free to stop by our booth, and we can sort of show that process. So once you have your model target and you have something that you can track, the next step to do is to go through and actually bring in a model that you're going to augment. So in this case here, what I'm going to do is let me see here. I'm going to disable this guy here for now, and I'm going to pull in a model of the bike. Here it is. And inside of the hierarchy, I'm just going to put it inside of the model target. And then we can see it here. Now, it's in a weird position, but it's OK, because once it actually matches the object, it should work no problem. Just going to do one more attempt here. All right. So, and then at this point here, what we would do is that you can track it. You're sort of seeing the augmentation. And then you can do things like sort of bring in some shaders and actually start implementing your gameplay. So I'm just going to take a quick, I mean, this is stuff that you guys all seen before. Right? So bring in a quick material, put it over, and then when you catch it, you should see it live, happening live. Now I am going to go ahead and continue on here. OK, cool. All right, so once you have the augmentation all set up and you have everything tracking properly, we're going to talk about some best practices and some of the things that probably got involved in today's demo. So what makes a good model? So what makes a good model here is generally we're looking for things that have a lot of features that we can properly track. We want to look for surface areas that so that we can see it. So anything that's too skinny or too anything that's sort of like very thin, there's not a lot of surface area, and when there's not a lot of surface area, we won't be able to catch it properly. And also, the actual thing, the physical thing that you're trying to track, works better when it has multiple colors, right? So something like this here on stage, we have all these colors, and we should be able to track it no problem. Now, with all that being said, right, so the color, the features, right, if you guys were to guess, just from that quick sort of introduction, which do you think would be better at tracking? So anybody here that might think that an alien would be easier to track on the left side, put your hand up. All right, one person thinks so. How many think the predator would be better? All right, so yeah, great. You guys are awesome. So that's right. So a predator would be easier to track. And in full disclosure, I haven't actually tracked this myself, but based on all those features, that's what's going to happen, right? So an alien is mostly one color, right? It's very dark. And then it's got quite a few organic shapes that are not that great for tracking. And then the other part of it is that it has really long, thin appendages. And that's going to also make it tricky for tracking. The predator, on the other hand, there's more surface, there's more color, there's more texture. This guy here in particular has a helmet, so you got a lot of those sharp edges that you can sort of track. Now scale. So this is what we were talking about before, right? So with model targets, we can track things as large as cars, and and things as small as these toys, right? So we actually have, this is a toy model of a real bicycle. So if you have the real bicycle, we can track that as well. Now, what you want to do is you want to sort of guide a user to the best experience. So these toys here, if you fill up the field of view of the camera when you're setting up your object, you're going to have to get really uncomfortably close to your object to actually get that working. If you're doing something like a car, right, you actually want to fill up more of the field of view, so that way you can sort of step back, right? So something that's small, you want to give a little bit of distance, so make it a little bit smaller in your field of view. Something that's bigger, you might want to fill up more, because if it's something that's larger than the user, you don't want the person to like go really far back, right? You're going to get a little bit closer. So something to consider as you're prototyping and you're like testing out usability is those kind of things. Now 3D printing. So one thing that I'd love to see developers try out is this idea, if you have your own assets, your own IP, getting them printed and augmenting them. So one of the things you want to make sure is that you have decent resolution printing. You also want to make sure that there's some color in there. So you might have some success on tracking things that are all one color, but we highly recommend it to be multiple colors. Now, and also, for these bikes, for instance, we usually track them from the side. That's because there's a lot of features there. We could potentially try tracking from the front, but there's less features, right? So we try to initialize the tracking from the side, so that we have tons of feature. And then, OK, so supported hardware. So right now in our EAP beta, we have iPhone 6, Galaxy S6, HoloLens, Surface. We will have more profiles available upon release. Some more design considerations. So lighting. So right now, I think part of the problem that I'm having here is that the lighting is all coming from one side, and we're getting a lot of sharp shadows. I think it's not helping with the tracking. Something to consider. Also, as the user is sort of rotating around, you want to have enough features happening around, so that way you can properly, just make sure everything is anchored properly. If you're doing something like something that's very, very large, right, but you want to focus on something small. So let's say like the real common example is a car dashboard, right? So you want the user to like walk in and start having all this crazy augmented experience inside of it. Now, you could try tracking the entire dashboard, but that's so big and the user is so close to it, that might have some issues. So what we recommend is like, hey, focus on the radio, or focus on a console, something that's smaller, that's going to be within the field of view of the device, and you'll be able to have really good tracking, good tracking success there. Now, as with any kind of experience or any kind of game or whatever, you always want to provide really useful feedback to the user. If you're trying to track something and it's not quite working, or if you have to switch positions, always consider what kind of feedback you're giving to your users, so that way you can guide them through. Because in traditional games and traditional media, you have complete control over the entire experience, right? For the most part. But when it comes to augmented reality, right, like you don't have so much control of the lighting, you don't have so much control of the positioning, all this other stuff, right? So you need to be aware of that and guide the user through that process. OK, so one thing that I want to kind of go through here is some possibilities, right? Now, I know I'm biased, but I'm of the opinion that there's a lot of opportunity in AR in games, right? So we've seen a lot of toys, we've seen some board games, some card games, but I feel like there's a lot of potential that we're still not quite tapping into. Like one of the ideas is that when you're tracking in AR, not only can you use this output, right, this informational, this display back to the user, but also consider the fact that when you're tracking, you have information about the relative position of the phone to whatever you're tracking. And what that means is that you have an input, right? You can get that data of the rotation and the position of the device compared to whatever they're doing. So that's a possibility that I don't think I've seen a lot of people explore, right? There's been a couple of, like there's a drone game that does that, but there's a couple of, there's some possibility there that I think people could explore. Furthermore, I think there's also potential for like local multiplayer games, right, where you have a couple people around, or a handful of people around a table. They all have their phones or tablets out. They could be playing a game with each other on a board game, And what's interesting about that is that you can provide a lot of information on one person's phone, but not another. So you can sort of control or make game mechanics where somebody knows where the booby traps are and they can see the booby traps, or another person has information about the game state that someone else doesn't. So I think there's some interesting possibilities there. And I think the most important thing is that when we're thinking about AR and going into the future of what we can do, we need to really consider the fact that it's a new platform and a new medium. So we need to consider the fact that we want to figure out what's the best way to leverage that and take advantage of that. So model targets will be, it's currently available in the AP, so feel free to sign up for it. It will be commercially available later this year, so you'll be able to build awesome things that track objects. And just as a quick reminder, Vuforia is going to be integrated into Unity later this year, so that means that you won't need to download a separate SDK. You won't need to download anything from the asset store. You can just get up and running really quick. Before the thank you, I just want to do it, because I couldn't get the targets working, I just want to do a quick video. So this is the experience, right? So you have the phone, you have the outline, it detects the object, and at this point here, you can start going through it and exploring it and augmenting it. You can put your mechanics around it. We're looking at two different devices. Two different bikes. So what's cool is that the color can change, right? Because we're looking at geometry, the color and some of the specifics of the models that we're dealing with can change. But we can still track it. So if there's wear and tear, if you're talking about like something that's people use, some kind of an appliance, there's wear and tear, there's all sorts of things like that. And then so we'll still detect it if it's dirty or whatever. And then you can sort of see, you can put all sorts of augmentations on the device. And it can scale all sorts of ways. So yeah, that is my talk. I just wanted to kind of go through the workflow. Thank you guys all so much for joining. I'm really excited about the fact that you all came on board. I think we have some time for some questions, and I'd love to take some questions. But if you don't want to ask a question now, if something comes up later, feel free to stop by our booth right out there. And then also, you can reach me on Twitter and ask me questions there. But yeah, I'll be happy to take some questions if anybody has them.
Hello, thank you so much for the presentation. I just wanted to ask about loading your data set at runtime, and would that be possible with the model target or not?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to go and research that for you and get back to you. But feel free to stop by our booth, and then I'll try to get that information for you. But I don't know right now off the top of my head exactly how much we can load during runtime for model targets.
OK, thank you.
Yep.
Hi there, thank you. What model formats can you actually load in? Is it just FBX, or can you bring in OBJs, DAEs?
Yeah, so earlier on I had a list. So we can do OBJ, we can do STL files. So most common engineering, so solid models and surface models we support. Let me get you a list here. So it's DAE, OBJ, FBX, IGS, STEP, PVZ, VRML, and JT. Possibly more in the future, but if you have a specific format, come talk to us and we'll try to figure it out. But for the most part, I think this covers most cases. Or you can at least convert it to that. Cool. Any more questions? Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.